Hello, everyone, and welcome to this conversation presented by White House Custom Color.
Are you trying to mute me?
No, it's just real loud, and I can't.
I sold Amazon when it was $25.
Listening to listen, not listening to respond.
Yes. Oh, thank you for that. All right, Allison, Tyler Jones, we're going to talk about pricing today.
I'm excited.
Well,
One of my favorite topics.
is it?
Actually, it is, because I've had so much trouble with it. And it's been I have hard-won knowledge of this topic.
It's one of my favorite topics too. But mostly because I think in all the workshops, all the stuff, and I've said this before, but in especially the one-on-ones, and I've maybe 300 or 400 of them where I'm sitting there and I'm talking to somebody one-on-one, and it starts to get real fast, right? Yeah. They go real fast. 85%, we end up talking about pricing the majority of the time. Let me start off by asking you, why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's kind of like the dirty little secret, or I don't know. It's the thing that people they do and don't want to talk about. They really do want to talk about it, but then people, I just think it's kind of embarrassing if you feel like your pricing isn't what it's supposed to be. You feel like you should know, especially I think there are people that have been doing it for a long time, that I would put myself in that category, before I kind of like got my head around it, that I had been doing it long enough to know what you're doing, and then realizing like that you aren't doing it right. And I continually come up against that again and again, in certain areas. Like how do you know which of your products is priced wrong? Is the one, it's the one that everybody's buying.
Oh,
that's what you're selling the most of, is the one that's priced incorrectly.
Now, I think there's some wisdom there, but it always makes me nervous to speak in with a broad generalization, because now everyone's going to be looking like, what am I selling the most of? And then is it possible that they could go in and break things by, jacking with the price of that one thing, and then all of a sudden nobody's buying it and their sales averages drop? And that's me being paranoid.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think that actually, to your earlier question, I think that actually is the answer, because we're so afraid we're going to break it.
Yes.
Okay, you got a price down. I put a number on it after being in the fetal position for 3 days. Now I can't ever change that, because somehow my clients are sitting at home with an Excel spreadsheet and they're refreshing my website going, oh, look, she changed it.
There it is.
$1. There it is. Never going to her again. Who the hell does she think she is? I am never going to her again. Your 11 by 16 that was framed in that one gold frame last year, $235, just went up to $237. Done. Never coming back.
I'm out.
Never coming back.
Obviously, you're a shyster.
Obviously. Never mind that you have a great relationship with my kids. You're the only ones that can get those heartbreaking expressions out of them. Done. Hate your guts. Never coming back.
Hate your guts. Yeah. Well, but we laugh. This is one of those things where we laugh about it and we can joke around about it. But the reason that we're doing that in the first place is because it's so absolutely true. Like, this is where your mind goes when it comes to pricing. This is what happens internally when it comes to pricing. It's scary enough to make people freeze for years. Is it not?
Oh, yeah. Well, I can't remember who it was that said, somebody at PPA was saying, maybe it was Bridget Jackson. She said it shouldn't take longer than having a baby to come up with a price list. And I'm like, oh, were you speaking to me? Because it pretty much took me like 10 months to come up with my first price list. That's an overdue baby.
Yeah. Well, but it does. Where do people generally go wrong?
Well, I think that, there are basically 3 pricing strategies if you look at just business in general. And I think where we go wrong is either maybe not knowing what those are or getting stuck in the one that is the least helpful.
There's three.
In my mind, I'm sure there are a million, if you're looking at corporate, but generally for a portrait photographer, I think there are three basic, which would be like a competition-based pricing, which is, it's like licking your finger, putting it out to the wind. What's everybody else charging? Like looking at, like going around to the other photographers in your market and kind of getting a general idea of what people are charging.
Right.
That's the competition based. The next one would be cost based, which is what we're taught if you're like a PPA member, like that sort of thing, where you're basically taking what does this actually cost you to create this thing, and then you're multiplying it by a multiplier of some kind of percentage. Yep. And then the third one which is one that's not really talked about so much, would be like more of a value based type, and that is, what's the value of that? And that's a lot more complicated. It's a lot harder. And I think it's a higher concept. So I know many extremely talented photographers who've never gotten past competition based. They're still, even when you have a conversation, in those conversations that you were just talking about earlier, what is it that you're hearing all the time? Well, I can't charge that. Nobody in my town charges. Right. I'm already
say it all the time. People say it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's everything is referencing this like nebulous competition out there.
Do you look at those three options as a progression or three separate, distinct options that have nothing to do with each other? Because it sounds to me like, in my mind, even if I look back at our own business, that was basically our progression. We started off just like, because we didn't know, we're looking around, how much should this be based on what everybody else does? Yeah. We did that. Then we discovered after, 18 months, well, we've been losing money this whole time.
Yeah. We're actually paying to work.
We did. And we were, 2-3 years go by and you're in debt and you're like, what the heck's wrong? Well, it's because we're paying everybody else to work for them. Yeah. And then we did the second option. We went through that process. It was arduous and painful because of how we had been doing it. And you have all these realizations, but then we were in a good spot. And then we in my mind, we did start to graduate towards that third option at some point where, that there are certain things where you're like, this has a value that goes beyond just merely that formula. Right. And that was even product specific in a lot of ways for us. So in your mind, does that progression make sense, or does that just happen to be how we did it and there is no progression in your mind?
I think that I have seen a lot of people progress through that. That's how I did it for sure. If I had it to do over again, if I could tell anybody that was starting, I would say skip one, competition based.
Sure.
Like the floor, the absolute floor is cost based. That's the bare minimum. And we could go like get out our friggin' boxing gloves and go toe to toe on what that means. Because I mean, anybody that spent 5 minutes on a Facebook private room in any of the photography, that whole cost plus, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cost of doing business versus cost of, that's like, you might as well just throw chum in the water of the sharks, like, because everybody's going to be fighting over that.
Well, but is this one of those situations where it's easy to, like you could say retrospectively, this is how I would do it. Is it easy to say now? I mean, is it one? Yeah, well, sure. It's easy for you to say that now.
Well, it is easy yes, of course, everything's easier to say now once something's been proven and you've been successful with it. Yeah, of course. When you're like picking your teeth with your Mai Tai,
yes.
toothpick. Yeah, yes. It's of course, it sounds great. But, yes. But really, I did not stay competition based long. That was a very, very short, like literally 6 months, because I had run a business prior, and I knew like very quickly, wait, this is not going to make money. Like I'm going to be paying people to work. So I think you have to start there. The intention, like this, so we could say if you're listening to this podcast and you're not about money, or you have no intention to make money, just move on to the inspiration podcast next. just stop
Skip
now.
this. Yeah.
You don't need this,
Right.
But if your intention is to be priced profitably and to make a sustainable living or a nice living, then you do have to address this. You do have to look at these harder things that creatives and right brain people don't really love. We don't love the maths so much.
The maths. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that one of the biggest problems that you see, is that it just comes down to photographers are super creative people and they don't like numbers, and they don't?
No, because I think when the numbers are good and it's supporting a really nice lifestyle, then we love the numbers. Then the numbers make us very happy, right? So It's not that photographers are dumb at math. I think part of it is valuing yourself. It's really hard. Like I said, when I had my store before, it was like, okay, this pen that I got from this wholesaler cost me $1. I'm charging you $2. There was no like existential angst. Like, I didn't make the pen. The pen wasn't my baby. You're selling your own work. And that comes with you just think that people are going to say like, you got to be kidding me, or you're not worth it, or there's just a whole host of things that we have in our mind. And so I'll just say, for my experience, when I really did the numbers, when I did that exercise and looked at like how much everything costs from the lab, how much time I was spending on it, so my time, the raw materials, all of that, and then applied that markup, whatever that is, whether it's, 3, 4, whatever. I literally, I don't want to be like gross, but like I had stomach problems. There was problems for like 3 days. It was Labor Day weekend, 2016. I remember this very clearly. And I couldn't sleep. I just kept thinking that I'm just not going to be in business then. I mean, there's no way anybody's going to pay this. So this is somebody who
because the numbers were so high.
Yeah. Right. I ran a very successful business for 12 years prior to this. So this was not like I didn't know how to do business or anything like that. This was just like, okay, I can see that this is what the price has to be in order for me to pay myself and be profitable and sustain my family, because this is what I've chosen to do. But there's no way, and this is like, and I've heard this quote so many times, there is no way anybody is going to pay that. There's no way. And so then I thought so here was the hard truth. There's no way anybody's going to pay that. Then the other hard truth was there's no way I can proceed with this business unless I charge this. So those were the two things that I was up against. So charge it or move on to something else. So in my mind, those were my two choices. So I had to at least try it. But
in the worst fear scenario, right? When you're on the front side of that decision and you're like, well, these people are going to say, no, they're going to say I'm crazy. They're going to, I'll never see him again. I'll lose all these clients, et cetera, et cetera. That does happen to a degree, does it not? I mean, you're not going to lose all your clients, but you might lose some clients. You might. Right?
You might, or they might just buy less things instead of walking out the door after you've like literally sacrificed yourself on the altar of retouching, and they're carrying, like they're loading their car up with every single product that you sell, and you still didn't make any money.
For
they might walk out with one product
for
that same amount of money.
Right.
And be really, really happy if you did your job right.
Right.
So there's a lot that goes into it. There's definitely a lot that goes into it.
Then where to begin? All right. So someone's listening and they think, well, I'm the competition-based person, or we don't need to speak maybe to so much to the people that are at the value-based, if you got a $6,000 average, good on you, keep going. Right. But if someone's struggling
to be 12,000, I mean,
sure.
I think it's everybody. I think one of my beefs sometimes with education in this industry is everything is geared to that lowest, the beginner. I don't want to say lowest. I'm just going to say beginner.
Sure.
But I just feel like that if you're a striver and you're ambitious and you like want to think big, sometimes it's really hard to find that information, and so I think we can have this conversation without dumbing it down, because the principles are absolutely the same regardless of what we're talking.
You can apply this if you have a $10,000 average, you can apply this if you want to have a $20,000 average.
100%.
So where do you start?
Okay. So
I like that, by the way.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that.
So, you're welcome. I know for myself, I find that when I remove the mental barriers, I do better, because I tend to as human beings, we like to put ourselves in boxes, and I'm the guiltiest, I'll never do this. I could never be as whatever, So I would say number one would be stop comparing yourself in any way, shape, or form to anybody else, because there is no other you. And especially in this business in particular, you are a market of one. So that's it. You're a market of one. Now, so that's period. End of story. I'm not going to qualify that.
Okay.
So competition-based pricing doesn't have any, in my mind, I don't need to know what my competition is charging.
It has no relevance.
Where it does have relevance is if you are shoot and burn only. So let's just say that you're selling just X number of files for a X number of dollars. Okay. So that's your only product.
Yeah.
Listen to the first in this series, because that is the most, that now is what back in the day they used to say, the most price sensitive thing was how much is your 8x10.
Right.
A set of files for X number of dollars is the most price sensitive product out there, period.
Yep, that's correct.
So that's where you may find yourself doing the side eye and going, okay, what is everybody else charging?
Mm-hmm.
Still don't think you should, but if you've brought products into your business, you're decided that you're going to do a finished product of one kind or another, whether that's wall art, albums, what have you, then we don't need to know what anybody else is charging. Doesn't matter, because you don't know them. It's like your mom said, worry about yourself. You don't know if they have a studio. Are they home based? You don't know if they're bad with money, if they're good with money, if they're smart. Like, it's the blind leading the blind. You don't want to be the blind. You'd want to go figure out your own situation. Okay. So you need to dig into that. That might require an Excel spreadsheet, which is a little bit scary, but actually it doesn't really even require Excel. It's literally like basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, maybe a little bit of division, but not a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm math challenged, truly. I you know how you say you're illiterate if you can't read? I'm innumerate.
Innumerate.
I have math problems. So, so it has, but I love managerial accounting. I love what the numbers mean, but the numbers themselves sometimes can be a little bit sticky. So.
Okay. So then what do you do?
Okay. So I do what I did is I just took those formulas. I went and figured out, okay, this 8x10 at White House Custom Color costs, I don't know what they are now, like $3 or something like that. Am I going to mount it? Is it going to be sprayed? Is it going to be, how is it? Then what am I putting it in? Is it going in whatever? And so that's all just the hard costs,
fixed costs. You have fixed costs.
Yeah, that's just that. Then I how many people generally are in a picture? So how many heads are we retouching on average?
Okay.
How much time does that take?
Right.
And then how much time does it take me to cull a session? And all of these sorts of things, and I'm breaking that out. And so there's like a lot of time.
Yeah.
I always put that time in there because you find that the actual hard cost of the materials is usually the least expensive part of the whole thing. So if you're just basing it on cost of materials, you're not looking at the full picture.
Do you consider how much it would, do you come up with that number based on your own time, or is that number a product of how much it would pay you to have somebody else do that? Is that how you come up with that number? If
I based it on my own time, it would be so incredibly expensive because I'm the most expensive. Yeah. So it would be if I had to outsource it, like if the lab was going to do it, or I was going to outsource it to somebody, like how much is that retouching? Like at the bare minimum, how much would that cost? I'm basically taking what my employees actually cost me.
Sure.
to have that done. But if I was outsourcing, I would just look at like if it was, Retouch Up or whoever else they're outsourcing things to, how much does that cost on average?
Right.
And then put that in. And then once you have that number, then you times that by whatever you want your markup to be, whether that's 4, 5, whatever. What are you hearing? I mean, what do you, I don't know. Or do you want to talk about percentages?
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is that you're throwing out number 1, which I think is a good idea. You're embracing number 2 and starting there foundationally, right? And I think you said earlier that that's like your ground floor, right? You start there, but understand that that's the bottom rung of the ladder, so to speak. What does that here, maybe this is the big question. I get all of that, and that makes sense. But what does it look like then to go into value-based pricing from that ground floor? And what factors do you consider? I'll throw out something real fast from myself. I would used to tell people, you kind of have to look at your own lifestyle and what your own desires are and how you want to live and how, your family and like those factors. Like, do you want to drive a Ferrari or do you need to live in a mansion? Whatever that looks like, right? Do you like to eat at Morton's or are you good running through McDonald's? Like, you start to factor in those decisions as far as what you need to do value-based. Now, the first thing I'm thinking of when I say that is what you told me at one point, is that not to look at something and say, how can I get $5,000 for this? You said, how can I create something that's worth $5,000? Complete
for sure
frame of mind switch. But how is one married to the other, or is it at all?
I don't know. I've never really liked that. Like, what lifestyle? I mean, I think,
but it's a factor. It's a huge factor.
I know. Like, I have 7 kids, mean, that you have 2, you need more,
right?
But I don't, when I'm pricing my work, I don't tend to think in those terms. I really am looking at, like, in the mind of my client, like, how can I make this worth, that they feel like this was pricey, but it was so incredibly worth it, Right. So I'm trying to not put the focus on me, even though obviously I'm running the business. I want to get paid from it, like the course, So I think, yes, which actually brings me to a different thought. I don't know if we're going to divert here. But the thought of that when we don't price it right. So those that are listening to this that are like, this is making me very uncomfortable.
Sure.
I don't like this. And when you go to list those costs out and really, I don't care how long you've been in business. I don't care if you're running a studio that's pulling down $1 million a year. Don't care. You need to look at this every single year. You need to look at, because there's going to be holes. There's going to be problems. And really, it's like nobody wants to look at it. It's like tracking your food and looking at your calories. Nobody wants to know that number. Nobody wants to know that number because we all think, well, it was about 1,500 today, I think, except for that half a dozen donuts that I pounded on the way to work or whatever. Right. So it's the same thing. Oh, I know how much it is. Like, I know generally, I don't need to really look into it. But once you do look into it, then that knowledge becomes power but there's pain before the power, it's just painful.
Yes.
But if you never look at it, then you don't actually really know. And so anyway, I just had to say that. So then what happens is when we're not charging enough, we get into this, what I call like adversarial relationship with our clients. Okay. So any policy that you have that creates an adversarial relationship with your clients, and by adversarial, I mean negative, them against us. Okay.
Yep.
So And so that can be anything. That could be like your adversarial contract that you're sending out to your client before a session that says you need to initial here that if you wear like, circus tent stripes across your arse, that I'm not responsible for retouching that if your kid cries, I'm not responsible for snot running down their face. I mean, you've seen those contracts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's an adversarial, like negative thing, because what you've done is you've made a policy for all those pain in the butt people that have made your life hard. So you're just making these policies. So what happens with pricing negatively is something like this. It's an inner dialogue, which as you're retouching or you're doing something for a client and they've beaten you up and you're like, well, they're only paying $20 for this 8x10. So I am not doing eye enhancements or whitening teeth. Like, what do they expect for $20? Right. So you get into this negative death spiral and you're trying to protect yourself and not give them as much things because they're not paying as much. Right. But let's think about this. You're punishing the person who's not paying very much and who set the price.
Yep. You're punishing somebody else for something that you're responsible for.
Right. So nobody's going to come in and go, you know what, Jed and Vicky, like this heartbreaking image that just makes me want to sing every time I look at it. I see here that you've only charged me $50, but you know what? I'm going to pay you $100 because it is so worth it to me. It's never going to happen. They're just going to be like, great, give me 10 of them. Yeah. And they're going to load up their car with everything that you sell and you're going to go be broke. And mad, right? But the opposite happens when you charge what you're worth, even that scary thing. You figure out the reality. You have the scary, you look and you see what that price needs to be, you charge it. And so this is what happened to me over that Labor Day weekend. Excuse me. Over that Labor Day weekend, I went back and was sick for 3 days, realized that basically I had doubled my prices. I had my first view and order with a client that Tuesday after Labor Day weekend. And she came in and I just moved forward. Here's
like
the
a boss. Like you just.
Yeah, this is this. I've been in business like 6 months. She spent $5,000. I just, of course, that's everybody that walks through the door. So no problem.
That's how we roll here.
Of course. I mean, And so I just didn't say anything, did the whole thing. She left and she left, walked out of my house because it was a home-based studio. And I shut the door and I slid down the door and sat. And my first thought was the epiphany, which was, I am going to kill myself for her. This stuff is going to be so perfect and so amazing that she is going to be singing my praises no matter how much she paid. So that's a different relationship. It's what you've done is you've created something of value for your client. They've exchanged their value for your value. And you now have this mutually beneficial, respectful relationship that it's going to be amazing. If that thing fades, I'm reprinting it in 5 years. If your kid knocks it off the wall with a Nerf dart and it cracks into a million pieces, I'm replacing it. That's a whole different mindset than I'm not making her butt look skinnier because she's only paying me $20 for this. What does she expect?
Let's say then, I think everything you're saying is fantastic. And I love that story. That reminds me of a couple different stories. But in any case, let's say that you have the person that's listening to this and they've even done the cost base and they have what they're finding out now is the lowest rung because they thought maybe to themselves, oh, I took care of this. I did this already, but the value-based thing hasn't even occurred to them potentially. Right. And maybe this is the value-based person as well. And they've come up with a price. They were at like $800 for a 30/40. And now after doing the cost-based thing and maybe even the value-based thing, they're at like $1,600. They doubled their price or they're at $2,000 because they thought the value is more there. And they're realizing that, you know what, that's still not where I think that should be for whatever reason, just say right. For whatever reason. How do you then determine when you're past all that, those steps, how do you then determine what its value should be?
Ooh, that's such a good question. Well, I think it's personal. I mean,
I think it is too.
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%. But what sort of factors do you consider? Let's say that it is very personal, even, because I think it is at that point, right?
Yeah.
The spreadsheets don't have quite the effect at this point. I'm not saying that you can't look at data. I'm not saying that you can't factor in all kinds of different numbers if you want to, but I feel like it's more than that. There's more there at this point. And yet I feel like it's a critical point, especially for the people that are already kind of there, like you mentioned before. And it's also maybe difficult to make these sweeping generalizations at this point too, but take a hypothetical, maybe use yourself, maybe not, but where do you go from there? How do you determine what, in this case, that 30 by 40 should be? What's reasonable, or what makes sense?
So obviously I'm always going to start with, is my pricing up to date? Do I have the current? How am I presenting this any differently than I had before? So let's just say that I want to make it more. So we'll just use round figures. Like, it costs me $500. I'm charging $1,000. Okay. Just that's not my pricing, but let's just say that for round figures. And then I want to make it, let's say I want to charge $3,000 for it. So if I want to do that, what does a $3,000 30 by 40 look like? So that's asking yourself those questions. What in my world, what does that look like? Okay. So what are my clients spending $3,000 for to hang on their wall? Are they? So those people that are spending that much on something to hang on their wall, sometimes, but not always, might collect art. So that's interesting. How is that presented? How is that sold? So that's interesting to me. How is it framed? Is it matted? Is it, so these are just, there's not a, let me tell you the 3-step formula. For
right.
You know what I mean? So, but these then become conversations. So it becomes conversations with other photographers that are that are working with the similar clientele. So you're looking at a different, that's a clientele that is not DIY. They don't want to do it themselves. They do not want to, they just want to bring their kids to you, have you create something, and then you just show up and hang it. Like, they're busy. They have stuff to do.
Well,
they want it handled.
And the way they're treated and the service that they're providing and that they are provided and the experience that they have is infinitely more important. You get to the point where that's infinitely more important than the money.
Yes.
They know that it's a lot of money, whatever that means. But it also brings up something in my mind, like at some point you reach a level where you're not going to be charging enough for certain people. And $3,000 doesn't exist on their wall. You're looking at $30,000 before it's something that they're going to deem worth putting on their wall. Is that we're getting into that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be in that world, but
my point is that world exists. No, that's a world. The world
totally exists, right? Exactly. Because how many times have you heard photographers maybe working toward that higher end where they'll say, well, my clients won't put family portraits on the wall. They have them in like little frames on their piano,
right? Because they don't consider them
in art. And I'm like, well, then you haven't positioned your work as art. Then
you got to position it as art.
Yeah, you haven't. And if it's or their interior designer said, no, we're not having fairy portraits in the dining room or whatever,
you need to work out a kickback for the interior designer.
Right. Well, or you got to elevate your taste level and figure out your, yeah, I know. My sister's coming for you on that one.
I don't know whether she would come with me and be happy, or she would come to me and be upset because I'm talking about giving you money, Carolyn.
Right. But But then I would also say, I can feel, even though nobody's listening to this live, but I can feel people out there, because I can remember listening to conversations like that when I was newer in the business.
Yeah.
Like, oh, brother, like that's such bull. Like nobody's going to spend that much money, blah, blah, blah. And just immediately turning off to this entire conversation. So I would just say to those people that are feeling a little angsty about this, open your mind. What if you did not limit what your clients could spend? What if you did not limit their experience? What if you, instead of saying, how can I charge more? It's like you said earlier, how can I make it worth more? So how can I, like if I'm in it, what does a $10,000 single product look like? What is that? What would I have to do to make that worth that in the mind of my client? Not in my mind, of course. You know, we all work so hard. We would like everything to be that, but like what in the mind of my client, what kind of experience? And so that's a high level question, you know, so anyway, so I don't know if that's helpful. Are we being confusing? Are we pressing down a road here? What are we doing?
No. I would hope that it's being helpful in that what we're essentially saying, what I'm trying to say, what I hear you saying is that, you know, the thought process of no one's ever going to spend that is categorically untrue all the time at every level.
For sure.
It always is. Like you could get to the point where you are selling a $10,000 wall portrait and be like, I want to bump this up to 20, but no one's ever going to spend that. You're wrong. Yep. You're wrong there.
It's true. Yep. I've proven all of those faults at every turn, and I have to continually turn it over in my own mind. So let's just say that we've gone back. People have done the hard work. They've gone back. They've looked at their costs, and they've realized like, ooh, this needs to go up. And also I would really like it. I would like to be more profitable. I would like to have, you know, I would like to provide a better experience for my clients. So rather than I would like to be driving a Ferrari, I would like to be providing an amazing, better experience for my client, whether that means, you know, maybe you're wanting to go into studio space. Maybe you're wanting to frame things. Maybe you're wanting to have sexier packaging. Maybe you're whatever, like fill in the blank of whatever it is that do you really like to see your work be captured and delivered? And so that's also the bigger question to me is, how do you want to work? Do you want to work with less clients who spend more money so that you're not just busy, you know, because like we can all be busy. You can be free and you'd be really busy. You can be super cheap and be super, super busy, you know. You can do mini sessions every day of the week and be busy. Or do you want to be super profitable and spend really amazing amount of time with less people, somewhere in the middle, you know? So there's all different ways, and there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, but you do kind of have to realize that if you are going to be the only photographer in that business, there's only so you are not an inexhaustible resource, meaning you're not like a machine that just goes 24 hours a day. There's only one of you.
Yeah.
So you have to know what your capacity is, and then what point are you overbooked or whatever. So if you've decided, okay, I want to increase my prices, then that begs the question, how have you and Vicki done it? Like, do you do the increases over time? Are you just like adding like a percentage every year? Or when you realize that there's an error, a huge gaping error in your pricing, are you ripping the Band-Aid off, or are you just kind of massaging that over a period of time?
Well, if it's an error, a gaping error, I would like to think that we typically would rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
Right. And there's different ways to do that. But a lot of times you're better off not offering it at all than you are offering it if it's a gaping error like you are describing. And the other thing is, if you do rip the Band-Aid off and something goes from $40 to $240, and all of a sudden everyone's like, and they do realize that, and they decide not to buy it, you're better off. You're better off than if they buy 7 of them, if it's a gaping error and you're losing money every time. So I like to keep that in mind. Incrementally, I think in general, this, and I'll say this relatively loosely, that if you're not raising your prices to some degree every year, then I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because I think people expect it, for one thing. I think the way that the economy works and the way that life works in general dictates that that's generally a necessity, right? And I'm talking about what, 2%, 3%, whatever it is that you should be doing
10.
every year, 10, 40%,
Yeah.
whatever. You know, I mean, because it goes back to me, or it goes back to what we were saying earlier, like conceptually, and the principles regarding these things, they exist at all levels, right? It doesn't matter at what level you are or how much experience you have. It's like when you're saying, oh, I want to make this product worth this, and I want to make this product worth that, and I want to make these changes here. Well, those changes that you're going to be making are going to be affecting your cost-based pricing structure, that bottom rung, that foundation that you have. So right away, understand that your rung, it's still the first rung.
Yeah.
But that cost-based pricing analysis has gone up that much more. So your foundation itself has risen when you make those changes. And I think that it's important that we're cognizant of that when we go that route. Then the value-based thing for me is like, this happened to us when we were getting out of weddings, and we just kept doubling our prices for weddings. But we found that we kept getting more, like the demand went up. It didn't go down. It went up. And what we were doing was we were pricing ourselves into upper tiers.
Yeah.
And what we discovered, and I think this is what we hit on, is there is no end to upper tiers. I mean, where it ends is like Elon and Jeff and Bill.
Yeah.
Sure, there's an end there, but I mean, we're not there. There are so many levels in between where we are and what those people are capable of doing. They might have 16 people below them in their own personal network of buyers that are making those decisions for them. And so my point is, we doubled, we got more. We doubled, we got more. We got to the point where my wife was legitimately uncomfortable shooting a wedding for what we were going to ask the following year. And she said, you know what? I'm just pulling the plug. I don't want to do it. That's what it came down to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you discover when it's value, when you're looking at the value base and what I can offer and how I can make this worth this, whatever that is, there's no limit there. There just isn't one.
Yep.
And I think that that's exciting.
Totally. Yeah. Once we get out of our own way, and I think everybody listening to this has had experience like that in one area or another in their life, where you've realized, you know what, the only person in my way here is me. Like this is just how I'm thinking about this. I've got this, you just realize that you're just completely wrong, Well,
and if you take the things that you're interested in, take something, everyone's got their own stuff that they're really, really interested in. Some people are really, really interested in cars. If you're really, really interested in cars, that you can spend whatever. I'm really interested in like audio gear and home theater stuff. And my friend said to me, well, how much can you really spend on that? They wanted some speakers. And I was like, well, what's your budget? Well, I mean, how much can you spend? And I was like, I could go online and spend $5 million in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And it blew their mind. They actually thought that I was incorrect. It's like, you can't do that. Yeah. I absolutely could.
Yeah.
Without, it wouldn't even be hard.
Yeah.
And they're like, I just can't even believe that that's there. Well, it's fine that you can't believe that it's there, but just know that it is. It's fine that you think, oh, no one's. We had family members and our friends come in and say, who's ever going to spend, the type of money that you guys are charging, because they couldn't afford it, or they didn't value it, or they didn't want it, or they thought it was stupid.
Yeah. Or whatever. Like my husband, when he came into the business in 2013, and I sat him down and said, okay, you need to know what the pricing is so that you can talk intelligently about it. And he's like, okay. And so I showed it to him and showed him what the sizes were. And he's like, hun, We cannot charge that for an 11 by 14. He's like, so this is framed, right? And I'm like, no, that's not framed. What? There is no way. And I'm like, okay, well, this is a very bad beginning. And I'm going to need you to back off of that sentiment. In fact, you're not allowed to talk to clients until after the holiday season. Yeah. And then in the end of December, after we've lived through September, October, November, December, then I'm going to show you this again and we're going to have a different conversation. And it was absolutely the truth after we went through all of that. And he was like, okay, these prices got to come up. Yeah. Because he saw everything that went into it. Like he's over there doing the printing and like all this stuff. And I come in and like, nope, the midtones are wrong. Nope, that black suit looks blue, reprint it. Nope, the kid scratched it when we delivered it, reprint it. You know, he saw everything that went into it, the care and all the steps. And he was like, yeah, we got to raise the prices. So it's interesting.
We've gotten to the point where I wanted to get now, because what I'd like to cover now is that once you do raise the prices, you get there, you did it.
Yeah.
What's that look like client facing?
Exactly. Okay. So, you know what's I'm glad you brought that up, because here is what there's a rash, a problem going on. And so people are say they raised their prices. Okay. They did it. They took the 10 months to do the new price list.
Or 10 years.
Right. The existential angst has been mitigated in some form or another, like whatever. Okay. So now we're ready to go client facing. So these are the kinds of things I hear, not from men so much as women. Okay. Which is very interesting.
Well, you went there. All right.
I know, but I just have to say, I mean, I love my girls, but man. Okay. One is, okay, so I've got it. Can you help me figure out how to craft the email to announce to everybody that the prices have gone up? Okay. Yeah. You laugh, right?
I do a little bit.
Okay. And then I've got to grandfather in all of my clients that have worked with me.
Grandfathered in people. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right.
So what say you, Jed Toffer, to those two sentiments? You got to tell everybody, you got to broadcast it. There needs to be a MailChimp going out.
Why do you have to tell anybody? And why does anybody need to be grandfathered in? Those would be my very first questions for someone that feels as though I would say why. And then I would say, consider that neither one of those need to occur.
Right. Right. Exactly. Because like when did you last get an email from your attorney saying that his hourly just went up, or your dry cleaner, or any other service that you have like going on in your life? Right.
Nope, doesn't happen.
I will tell you that I have a cleaning lady that I love. She is notoriously underpriced. And about every 5 years, she realizes she can't make any money and she like doubles her prices, and it pisses me off. And I tell her, just raise them a little bit every year. Cause then when you double, then it makes me start shopping other services, because I'm like, holy crap. Whereas if you just did like, bake me like the frog in the boiling water. I just need to be cooked slowly.
Just
slowly. Do not make me jump out.
We don't even realize it. We're just like, this is still pleasant.
Right. Which is a different metaphor than what we're talking about right now. Okay. So let's just say that you have to raise your prices significantly more than the little temperature bump every year. Like you've realized that there's some areas where you've just really done it wrong and you need to, so just do it. Just do it. You don't need to tell everybody. You don't need to, because in my experience, clients don't really remember like specifically this product costs this much, that product costs that much. They remember overall the overall investment. That's been my experience.
But Allison, if I just do it,
yes,
people are going to freak out and I'm going to lose clients.
They will not. I think that every single time I have raised my prices, I am sure that is going to happen, and has never happened. It is a non-event.
You've never lost a client because of your prices going up.
Nobody's ever said to me, I'm not coming because of your prices. I'm sure that over time, as you know, I've changed the way that I work, going from like unframed prints to everything's finished wall art, that sort of thing. that there have been times where people have called and I've heard them on the phone with my, employees going, okay, well, so is there any way we can just get unframed prints or that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
And then we might talk about that, but my price for my unframed prints is like not very much less than my framed prints. It's because value is the art. It's not what it's framed in. Right. So and then you can hear them say, I think I've had occasion where somebody's like, it's not in the cards this year. But we'll come next year. So it might have taken them from coming every year to every other year, or from buying a lot of things to buying less things. But if I have provided them with the experience and the work and all the things that they're looking for, and they're my ideal client, then they're going to come along with me. They just might have to spend a little bit less.
Well, and you said it. I would also submit that if you do lose a client or 2 or 30, that they weren't your ideal clients anyway.
Right. But that's a scary thing when that thing right there just made everybody's sphincter clench that was listening to it.
But I don't mind that. I don't mind that because I want to give somebody a relatively realistic expectation. Right. And maybe it will go the way that it has gone for you. Maybe it will. But maybe it won't. Okay. So here's the thing. You can't, in my opinion, this is just my opinion. I don't believe in raising prices in isolation, just like throwing it down and just doubling the prices. And here you go. This is what we're doing, baby. And we're doing the same thing. There's a justification of why that price has gone up. Yes. So I'm adding the value at the same time that the price is going up. Mm-hmm. I am adding value to that. So that might be how I talk about it. It might be the experience. Right. There might be more added to that. That doesn't necessarily mean like bigger, better, more gold frame, gold leaf, or it might not be a more expensive product itself, but the experience might be different. There might be more time and attention, that sort of thing. So to talk about price increase in isolation without a value increase that's very wrong, in my opinion. I think those two things have to go together. So if your prices are going up as a result of the value increase because of something else that you were doing or adding or changing, you're upgrading the experience, so to speak. Yeah. And you've addressed as a result, you've addressed the cost-based pricing within that structure, right? Mm-hmm. You are then at a point where you are client-facing, communicating that to them somehow, and maybe it is in an email blast, but you're not sending the email blast to tell them that the price is increased. Right. You're sending them the email blast to tell them about the value add that you've created or added or upgraded. Yeah. Right. We're doing this now. Look at this. And look what we're able to do now. Right. So rather than this like timid little like, okay, now, it's so hard in a business that costs go up and we want to give you everything. And so here's why we've raised our prices. I laugh at myself. Apologetic, horrible. Right. First of all, it wouldn't be an email to me. It would just be like the next time I see him and we have the conversation, it's like, I am so excited. I have this new thing. It's going to be so great. We're going to do this, and this. Right. And we're going to do that, and that. And then I'm going to bring it and hang it on your wall and it's going to be amazing. And so then they're like, oh, great. But even if you're putting, if you're putting social media content out there, you're not putting your social media content isn't screaming, it was $300 and now it's $899. Yeah, totally. Yeah. You're showing yourself on a ladder, hanging it on their wall. You're showing their kids jumping all over you during a session. You're showing, and so that's why I say it's not necessarily that when I say increasing the value, I'm not necessarily saying that you're making something more expensive for you. You might be doing exactly the same thing. It's just that you've all of a sudden realized your value. So going from the needy girl in the bar who's like totally hot, doesn't know she's hot, and is walking around going, please take me out. And there's a stage 5 clinger. Like nobody wants a piece of that. They know that that's a hot mess and they don't want that, right? You're leaning into the mic. Okay. I have no idea what you're talking about. That maybe wasn't even that cute. Okay. That it maybe isn't the most beautiful, right? But she walks in and she knows who she is. She knows what her worth is. You have a great time.
and then you're like, yeah, she's got it going on. I want it. I want that, So it's the same thing. It's like recognizing, wait a minute, I'm doing a consultation. I'm telling them what to wear. I'm available by text to weigh in on outfits times 75.
Right.
I'm laying out their walls to show them how this should go in their house.
Yeah.
I'm weighing in on how it should be framed. I'm helping that, like, from beginning to end. Now, I've always done that.
Right.
But I never valued it.
Right.
And because I didn't value it, the clients are like, yeah, okay, great.
Right.
You don't value it. They don't value it.
Right.
But I can talk about that more. And then as I talk about it more and I value it more, I put more into it, which makes the experience for them better.
Yes.
It makes the outcome better. It makes the product, the actual art, better because they're having a good time. They're relaxed. They're trusting me. They're not standing behind me talking to their kid, telling him to look over here because they know I will kick him out. And I've told them, you're not allowed to talk to your kid. It's going to be me and the kids against you. Like that, because we've had the conversations, they know. And so then that art is just, that's like a trophy of this family that they created.
And all of those things that you're mentioning are like that whole experience that you're mentioning is extremely associated, both consciously and subconsciously, with the image itself. Like if they have that big wall portrait, all of those things that you're discussing are associated with that photograph.
Yeah. And
conversely, if they have a poor experience, they can be associated with that photograph. You can have negative or positive associations with that. And I think as those levels increase, the dollar amount that's associated with it starts to go away more, and those things start to take more and more precedent.
Yeah.
Or they're that much more important. I know of somebody who told me that they know an artist. He's a painter. He gets $150,000. He's gotten to the point where he can command like $150,000 for a painting. And he had somebody buy his painting in Texas, big oil guy. And he said, you know what I want you to do? I want you to come down and show me where to put it in my home. So he said on the fly, he said, oh yeah, I do that. That's $10,000 fee. No problem. I want you to come down next week. Gotcha. I'm in. So he goes down there, walks into this sprawling mansion, and the guy's going to have a party. He's got the painting there. He's like, having a party next week. Where do you think I should put this? I really want to showcase it. He walks into the guy's ballroom and looks around. As one does.
Yes.
As it goes.
Yes.
He walks in and looks around for about 10 minutes, and the guy's there, just like, watching where he's going to put this. He says, I think you should put it up there on the ceiling in that corner. The man was delighted. I never thought about putting a painting on the ceiling before. That's fantastic. Puts it on the ceiling in his ballroom, has this big party, which this man is invited to, of course, and is walking around telling everybody, look at this. Look at this. I just had this commissioned. It's done. I bring the guy, I fly the guy down here for $10,000. And this is where he wants me to put it. Is that not the craziest thing? Look, so here I'm not saying that's what you should do specifically, but what I am saying is you reach a level where that in and of itself is part of the experience, and they have all those associations, right? Yeah.
And I think it's interesting when you're saying that the money part goes away. Actually, the money part never goes away, in my opinion. I know, but I think it's interesting. I'm just going to bring that back. I'm not contradicting you. I'm just saying that because, like, what this guy says, it becomes part of the experience.
Yes, right. It shifts. It doesn't go away. It morphs. Right. Yeah.
Right. For some people, there's some that would never brag, but there would be also like, I want to be known. Like when people talk about me, my clients, I do want them to say, yeah, it is not cheap, man, but you're never like your kids are going to have a great time. It is an awesome experience,
Yep.
you know? And I have had a client say to me, I had one client who spent 6 figures with me on
Oh my word.
And
Kudos.
she said, sitting there watching how that all went down, I would have paid just for that. Like it was worth just seeing that. That was worth everything. And I was like, really? So I don't have
let's set up an appointment on Saturday. We can do this every week.
Right. Like bring them anytime you want. But
I'll make this happen every Saturday.
But I just thought, you know, that's so interesting to me because what we're doing, we undervalue.
Yep.
We undervalue our time. We undervalue our talent because it's easy for us. You know, once you've mastered your craft, that's easy for us. So because it's easy, we undervalue it. We undervalue, how dare we ask for the money? How dare we, you know, but yet if our best friend came to us and said, this is everything I'm putting into this, and I want to charge this for it. Like, do you think I'm completely crazy? If it was your best friend and it was good, you would be like, no, it should be like 3 times that. You would be so supportive and helpful of that. But we just won't do it for ourselves. And there's like, why is that? And so it's not that you think that you're all that. It's not that you are, you know, just want to stand on a stage somewhere and say, oh, I charged X number of dollars, blah, 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 you know, once in my lifetime or whatever, you know. And we had a conversation about this on Clubhouse recently with a group of photographers where everybody kind of went into 2 camps. One went into the camp of like, well, I think it's better to get a steady, you know, $2,000 to $3,000 a sale than to occasionally get like a 10 or 20,000. And I'm like, well, I totally agree with that, but why don't we make the 10? Why don't we try to structure our business so the 10 is the regular? You know,
turn it into a both and.
Yeah, like
why does it have to be an either or?
Right. So, but we do that as humans because we feel like, okay, if I'm not doing that, that means it's not possible. They're full of crap. Right. It's not real. Right. Right. I mean, women, oh my gosh, we're genius at this. Like, you know, if you see somebody that's got like a cute shape or cute figure, you know, well, she's starving herself to death. You know, she never eats, you know, which is probably true, says the fatty, you know. But you know what I mean? Like we can't just let him like, well, okay, how are you doing that? Like, how would we do it? And so when you think about that, so because if your knee jerk is there's no way anybody will pay that. So like you go home, you look up your pricing, you do your cost of goods, you do all that stuff. There's no way. Okay. So say that there's no way anybody's going to pay this. Write it on a Post-it note, set it over to the side and go, okay, what if they did? What would I need to do? How do I need to talk about this product? What value do I need to communicate to my client so that they would? Where would I find the people who could? You know, so it's different questions. Sometimes we ask the wrong questions because we get insecure and we just don't want to look at, we feel like maybe we aren't being successful enough or whatever. But if we can just take the ego out for a minute and think, well, how could I? And how could I make it, again, not just charging more, but make it so worth so much more. Right. To ourselves first, and then communicating that to our client.
Brilliant.
You likewise.
This was pricing. Our second in this series. We went over pricing today. I think it was a very good discussion. You always make me think about things. It's a little uncomfortable sometimes because you always make me think about things that I thought I had figured out. You know, I like having things figured out. I like being on the other side of having things figured out and being like, I could put that away because I got that figured out. But you always challenge that for me.
You know what? Certainty is, I'm an oldest child. So the prime directive of oldest child is must be right, must be perfect. But first, even before perfect is you must always be right.
Got to be right.
Yeah. And I have learned that has gotten me into some very dark places.
All the time.
Yep.
All the time.
Yep. And I do better when I remove those things. How am I wrong? Where can I learn? Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you, Allison Tyler Jones. I appreciate this one, and I am looking forward to the next one now more than ever.
Awesome. See you soon.
Have a great day.
You too.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this conversation presented by White House Custom Color on YouTube. Be sure to check out our other content and click that subscribe button right there. Right. Right there. It's there somewhere.